The night I saw his wedding photo, I realized I had never really gotten over him. I had just packed the whole thing away well enough to function. I could go to work, answer emails, smile when people expected me to, and pretend I had become a normal version of myself again. Then there he was on my phone screen, dressed in black, smiling that same easy smile I had once been stupid enough to think meant something special when it was pointed at me. I stared at the picture so long that the coffee on my desk went cold. A coworker passed by and asked, "You okay?" I looked up too fast and said, "Yeah, just tired." That had always been my favorite lie. I used it when I was 17. I used it when I was 18. I used it every time somebody got too close to the truth. But that night, after I got home and sat alone in my apartment with city noise leaking in through the window, I kept looking at that photo like it might change if I gave it enough time. It did not. He looked happy, really happy. And the strangest part was that I was not angry. I was not even surprised. I think some part of me had always known this was how the story would end. He would keep moving forward, and I would be the one left carrying a version of us that had only ever existed inside my own chest. His name was Ryan. We met when we were 17. He was the kind of guy people noticed without him even trying. Loud in the best way. Friendly with everyone. The kind of person who could walk into a room and somehow make it feel easier for everybody else. He helped people without acting like he deserved credit for it. Teachers liked him. Classmates liked him. Even people who barely knew him liked him. I was nothing like that. I was quiet, careful, the kind of person who only really opened up around people I trusted. Back then, if you had asked me why I noticed him, I probably would have said it was because he stood out. That would have been the easy answer. The truth was, I noticed him because he made everything around him feel lighter. The first time he really talked to me was after school. I was standing outside the gate with my bag over one shoulder, waiting for traffic to thin out before I started walking home. He pulled up beside me on his bike and said, "You heading this way?" I looked at him, a little confused, and said, "Yeah." He nodded toward the back and smiled. "Get on. I am already going that way." I remember hesitating because I barely knew him then. He laughed and said, "Relax. I am not kidnapping you. I just do not like watching people walk home alone in this heat." So I got on. That should have been nothing. Just a ride home. Just a nice guy being nice. But I still remember the warm air, the late afternoon sun on the road, and the stupid way my heart kept beating too fast over something so ordinary. At the time, I did not know that one small ride would turn into late-night messages, shared meals, long drives around the city, and years of loving someone I was never supposed to love like that. But when I saw his wedding photo that night, that was the first memory that came back. Not the heartbreak, not the silence. Just a 17-year-old boy turning toward me with an easy grin and saying, "Get on." At first, Ryan was just the best part of my day in ways I did not know how to explain. After that first ride home, he started showing up everywhere in my life with the kind of easy confidence that made it feel like he had always been there. He would wait for me after class without even asking if I wanted company, like he had already decided the answer for both of us. He would pull up beside me on his bike and say, "Come on, I am starving." And somehow that became enough of a plan. We would stop at little places around town after school, a burger stand near the gas station, a milk tea shop with bad air conditioning, a fried chicken place that always smelled better than it tasted. He talked the whole time. About teachers he was convinced secretly hated their jobs. About classmates who acted like their lives were reality television. About songs he played nonstop for 1 week and then never touched again. I mostly listened, which he never seemed to mind. Once, while we were sharing fries out of a paper tray, he looked at me and said, "You know, you are quieter than anyone I know, but somehow I tell you everything." I tried to shrug it off and said, "That sounds like a you problem." He grinned and pointed a fry at me. "No, that is a trust thing." Back then, one sentence like that could stay with me for days. It was not just the time we spent together. It was the way he made all of it feel normal. At night, after dinner, my phone would buzz with some random message from him. A picture of the sky outside his house. A complaint about homework. A stupid joke that was not even funny, but still made me smile because it came from him. Some nights those messages turned into full conversations that stretched past 10, then 11, then midnight. My room would be dark except for the light from my phone, and I would be lying there smiling at a screen like an idiot while he told me about his family, his plans, the things he wanted to do after graduation, the places he wanted to see. "If I ever get out of this city, I am not coming back," he texted me once. I wrote back, "You say that now." His answer came almost right away. "No, I mean it. And when I go, you are visiting." I stared at that message longer than I should have. Then I typed, "That sounds expensive." He replied, "I will drive." Problem solved. There are feelings that do not hit all at once. They build slowly out of routine, repetition, and being chosen often enough that your whole body starts to believe it means something permanent. Ryan became my routine without either of us ever saying it out loud. He was the first person I looked for at lunch, the name I waited to see on my phone, the voice that could change my mood in less than a minute. If I had a bad day, he somehow noticed before I said anything. "What is wrong with you?" he asked once the second I got on the back of his bike after school. "Nothing." "That is a lie. You have your quiet face on." I laughed a little and said, "I always have my quiet face on." "No," he said, glancing back at me with that easy confidence I had already started depending on. "This one is different." That was the thing about him. He noticed me, not in some dramatic movie way, not like somebody falling in love, just in the way a person notices something that has become part of their everyday life. And maybe that was exactly why it got so dangerous for me, because the more ordinary we became, the more necessary he felt. I still did not call it love then. I did not even let myself think that word. All I knew was that if a day passed without seeing him, something in me felt off. And if I spotted him across the courtyard walking toward me with that loose, easy smile, the whole world suddenly felt easier to stand in. By the time winter started easing into spring, Ryan and I had become the kind of friends people noticed before we did. We were together so often that nobody really questioned it anymore. If he was at the gate after school, people assumed he was waiting for me. If I was carrying an extra drink, people assumed it was for him. If one of us was missing, somebody usually asked where the other one was. He made it all feel easy, like being close was the most natural thing in the world. The problem was that when something feels natural for long enough, you stop asking whether it is safe. One afternoon we were sitting on the low wall outside school, sharing a bag of chips while traffic crawled past the entrance, and one of our classmates walked by and smirked at us. "You two are basically dating at this point," he said. My whole body tensed, but Ryan just leaned back on one hand and answered without missing a beat. "Yeah, he is my baby." Then he bumped his shoulder lightly against mine like it was the funniest thing in the world. The guy laughed and kept walking. I laughed too because that was what I was supposed to do, but for the rest of the evening that sentence stayed inside me like something I had no business holding on to. Later that night I texted him, "You really enjoy making my life difficult." He replied, "You love it." I stared at the screen and typed, "That is a bold assumption." His answer came back fast. "You still texted me." It was always like that with him, half joke, half warmth, just enough to make me feel chosen and stupid at the same time. Around then, I started noticing the little habits we had built without talking about them. If I packed up slowly after class, he waited. If it rained, he handed me his extra jacket without asking whether I needed it. If I skipped lunch because I did not want to deal with people, he still showed up and dropped food on my desk like he had every right to. "Eat," he said once, standing over me with a carton of fried rice from the place near school. "I am not hungry." That is not convincing. You are very bossy, and yet you still listen to me. He was right. I almost always did. I told myself it was because he was easy to follow, because he moved through life like he expected things to work out, and standing near that kind of confidence made me feel less invisible. But deeper than that, something else had started happening. I was beginning to measure my days by him. A day felt good if we talked a lot. A day felt wrong if he seemed distracted. My mood could rise or fall depending on whether he texted back quickly or disappeared for a few hours. I knew that was not normal. I knew it even then. I just did not know what to call it yet, and maybe part of me did not want to know. One Friday after school, we ended up riding farther than usual, past the main roads and shopping blocks, out toward the edge of the city where things got quieter and the air felt cooler. He pulled over near a small park with a broken fountain and asked, "Do you ever think about getting out of here?" I sat on the bench beside him and said, "Sometimes." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked out at the empty path ahead of us. "I think about it all the time," he said. "I swear, if I stay here forever, I am going to lose my mind." I smiled a little. "You are dramatic. I am serious." Then he looked at me, not laughing now, and added, "You should come with me one day." My chest tightened in. That familiar, impossible way. "Where?" He shrugged. "Anywhere. Somewhere bigger. Somewhere nobody knows us." The way he said us should not have mattered as much as it did. But it did. I tried to keep my voice steady when I said, "That sounds unrealistic." He smiled again, lighter this time. "You are unrealistic. That does not even make sense." "It does in my head." I laughed because I did not know how else to survive him. The truth was, by then I had already started needing him in ways I could not explain to anyone. Not even myself. And the worst part was that I still believed I had time. Time to figure out what I felt. Time to keep pretending this was just friendship. Time before anything came along and reminded me that no matter how close we looked from the outside, he still belonged to a world I was only borrowing. That reminder came sooner than I wanted. Ryan had a girlfriend when I first got close to him, but she went to another school, so most of the time she existed more like a fact than a real person in my day-to-day life. I knew about her the way you know about weather in another state. It was there, technically, but it rarely reached me. He still spent most afternoons with me. He still texted me late at night. He still looked for me first during breaks and acted like my time belonged naturally beside his. That was probably why I let myself get comfortable. Not because I thought he was mine, but because I started believing I mattered in a way that could not be easily replaced. Then senior year began and something shifted. He got moved to a different class, which should have changed everything, but somehow it did not. He still found me during lunch. He still waited near the gate after school. He still drove me home and dragged me out for food even when I said I was not hungry. "You know," he told me one afternoon while we were eating noodles at a little place near the market, "if anybody watched us long enough, they would think this is weird." I looked up from my bowl and said, "It is weird." He smiled. "Yeah, but it works." That sentence stayed with me because it was exactly the problem. Worked. Whatever we were, whatever name the rest of the world would have given it, it had become the shape of my life. Around then, he invited me to visit his grandmother with him during a holiday break. I still remember how fast I said yes, like I had been waiting for him to ask. We took the long road out of the city, and I sat beside him feeling happier than I had any right to be. His grandmother's house was old and quiet and warm in that unmistakable way some homes are, like they have held generations of voices in the walls. He showed me around like I already belonged there. He introduced me without hesitation. He made room for me at the table. At one point his grandmother smiled at us and asked, "So which one of you talks more?" Ryan pointed at me with a completely straight face and said, "Definitely him." I laughed and said, "That is a lie." She laughed too and shook her head like she already understood us better than either of us understood ourselves. That whole trip did something dangerous to me. It gave me the feeling that I had stepped over some invisible line, that I was no longer just a friend from school but a real part of his life. On the ride back, he was in an especially good mood, one hand on the wheel, singing badly along to songs on the radio, and I remember thinking that if life could just stop for a while and leave us there, I would have stayed in that moment forever. We even started buying matching things around then. Stupid little items at first, the same bracelets, the same shirts, a pair of hoodies in different sizes but the same color. People noticed, of course. People always notice the things you are trying hardest not to examine. "What is this?" one of our classmates asked, pointing at our matching bracelets. "Are you two dating now?" I opened my mouth to laugh it off, but Ryan beat me to it. "Yeah," he said casually, throwing an arm over my shoulder. "He is my baby." Everyone around us laughed. I laughed too because what else was I supposed to do? But my chest went warm in a way that made it hard to breathe. Later that night I texted him, "You really need to stop saying things like that." He answered, "Why? You do not like being my favorite." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "That depends on how many favorites you have." He sent back, "Only one this week." Then a second later, "Do not get emotional about it." I told myself it was all a joke. I knew it was a joke. But feelings do not care what your mind already understands. By then, what I felt for him had moved far beyond simple attachment, and I think some part of me knew it, even if I still refused to say the word out loud. I just knew that when he looked at me, I felt chosen, and when he joked like that, I carried it for days. I also knew that if the wrong thing changed, if the wrong person came close enough to matter, everything I had built inside myself around him could come apart faster than I was ready for. The wrong person did come close enough to matter, and the worst part was that I helped it happen. One afternoon Ryan dropped into the seat beside me during lunch with the kind of grin that usually meant he had already decided I was going to be involved in something whether I wanted to be or not. He stole half my soda without asking, then said, "I need your help." I looked at him and said, "That sentence never leads anywhere good." He leaned closer anyway and lowered his voice like he was about to confess a crime. "There is a girl in my class." I do not know if anyone around us noticed the way I went completely still, but inside me it felt like every moving part had suddenly locked into place. I kept my face neutral and asked, "Okay." He smiled in that bright, careless way of his and said, "I think I like her." I remember nodding like that was normal, like I was hearing weather news, like the world had not just shifted half an inch in the exact wrong direction. "So talk to her," I said. He groaned and leaned back in his chair. "That is why I need you. You are good at noticing things. That is not the same as being good at romance. You are less embarrassing than my other friends," he said. "That counts for something." So I helped him. Of course I did. I told him what kind of messages did not sound too eager. I told him which jokes to avoid because they were not actually funny. I listened while he overthought every little interaction and replayed every conversation like it was a major event. Some part of me kept hoping it would go nowhere, that this would just be another passing interest and I would get Ryan back the way I knew him. But it did not go nowhere. It worked. A few weeks later, he came running up to me after class, grabbed my shoulder and said, "She said yes." I forced a smile so quickly it almost hurt. "That is great." He looked so happy that I hated myself for not being able to feel happy with him. "You do not sound excited enough," he said. "I am excited," I lied. "I am just tired." There was that lie again. Reliable. Familiar. Good enough to get me through another day. Her name started showing up everywhere after that. In his stories, in his texts, in the space beside him where I used to be the first person waiting. She was in his class, which made everything easier for them and worse for me. Suddenly he had someone else to walk with between periods, someone else to message first, someone else to think about before sleep. He still made time for me, at least at first. He still picked me up after school some days. He still dragged me out for food and told me about whatever ridiculous thing had happened in class. But there was a difference now. Small enough that no one else would have noticed and sharp enough that I felt it every time. His attention had somewhere else to return to. His phone would light up and I would know before he even smiled at the screen who it was. Once, while we were sitting on his bike outside a convenience store, he looked down at a message and laughed under his breath. "What?" I asked. He turned the screen away automatically and said, "Nothing." Then, because he was still Ryan and still too open by nature to fully hide anything, he added, "She is mad because I forgot something she told me this morning." I stared out at the traffic and said, "That sounds serious." He laughed. "You are jealous." My heart kicked so hard I thought he might hear it. I forced a shrug and said, "Of her memory? Yeah, maybe." He laughed again and started the bike. I smiled because that was easier than being honest. Around then, I started falling apart in quiet ways that only I understood. My classmates asked why I looked so out of it all the time. One of them nudged me in class and said, "What happened to you? You look like somebody broke your heart." I gave the first explanation that came to mind. I broke up with my girlfriend. It was a stupid lie, but it was simple, and people accepted simple lies when they sounded familiar enough. They even gave me a nickname after that. Sad boy. The whole class picked it up. Even one of the teachers joked about it once when I forgot to answer a question. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I got good at that. Ryan laughed with them, not cruelly, never cruelly, just the way people laugh when they think they are all standing on the same side of the moment. He slung an arm over my shoulder afterward and said, "Come on, sad boy. I am buying you a drink after school." I wanted to tell him that the worst thing about pain is when the person causing it is also the only person who can still make it easier to carry. Instead, I just nodded and followed him out to the bike, because by then I did not know how to stop. Graduation should have felt clean. Everybody else seemed excited in that bright, shallow way people get when they are 18 and convinced life is finally about to begin. There were pictures, cheap flowers, parents waving from too far away, friends making promises about staying close forever. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I stood where people told me to stand. I let my classmates call me sad boy one more time and laughed like I had accepted the joke. But inside, I felt like I was already losing something I had never even been allowed to claim. A week after graduation, Ryan invited me on a trip with some friends. "Come on," he said over the phone. "It will be fun. We are just getting out of the city for a few days." I almost said no. Some small part of me already knew that watching him love someone else up close was going to cost more than I wanted to pay. But he was still Ryan, and when he wanted me somewhere, saying no felt harder than saying yes. "You are going to make me regret this," I told him. He laughed. "You say that every time and then steal my fries anyway." So I went. The first day was not terrible. We drove with the windows down, music too loud, everybody talking over everybody else like the future had not learned how to hurt us yet. Ryan was in a good mood the whole time. His girlfriend was there too, sitting close to him whenever we stopped, talking to him in that easy, intimate tone that made my stomach tighten for reasons I could never explain out loud. I kept telling myself to act normal. Do not stare. Do not compare. Do not make everything about you. Most of the trip I managed. I joked when I needed to. I stayed with the group. I let people think I was just quieter than usual. Then one evening we were standing near the hotel parking lot after dinner. The air still warm from the day. Everybody lingering outside because nobody wanted the night to end yet. I turned at the wrong moment and saw Ryan kiss her. It was not dramatic. Not long. Just easy. Familiar. Thoughtless in the way real couples can be when they have nothing to hide. And somehow that made it worse. It was so natural. So ordinary. Like I was the only one standing there watching my own heart crack over something the rest of the world would call completely normal. I looked away fast, but not fast enough. Ryan noticed later. Back in the room, when everyone else got distracted, he sat down beside me and said, "What is wrong with you today?" I stared at the floor and said, "Nothing." He nudged my knee with his. "Do not do that. I know your face." I wanted to tell him everything then. I wanted to tell him that every time he touched her in front of me, it felt like something sharp turning slowly under my ribs. Instead, I gave him the first excuse I could make sound believable. Seeing you kiss your girlfriend made me think about my ex. He looked at me for a second, then gave a short, awkward laugh and said, "Man, that sucks." I nodded like that explained everything. He let it go. Of course he did. Why would he not? A few weeks later, he invited me to his grandmother's house again. But this time his girlfriend came too. That should have been enough for me to stay home. It should have been the moment I finally protected myself. But I still went because some pathetic part of me believed I could handle it if I just prepared better. I could not. The house was the same, the yard was the same, even the road there felt the same, but nothing about it belonged to me anymore. The first time I went with him, every small kindness had felt personal. This time I watched him pull out chairs for her, ask if she was hungry, hand her things before she even asked. None of it was wrong. That was the worst part. He was not trying to hurt me. He was just giving someone else the version of him I had once secretly built my whole emotional life around. I remember standing in the kitchen doorway while they laughed over something small and thinking, a few months ago, this used to be me. Nobody said anything cruel to me. Nobody pushed me out. But I felt like I had been quietly moved to the edge of a story I had once mistaken for my own. On the drive back the next day, we stopped at a fruit garden on the side of the highway. Everybody got out, took pictures, bought snacks, wandered under the trees like it was the most ordinary happy afternoon in the world. I stayed close enough to look involved and far enough to breathe. At one point they sat down near me on a bench, still smiling, still wrapped inside their own little world. And when he kissed her again, something inside me gave way so completely that I had to stand up and walk off before anyone saw my face. It felt like my chest had become too small to hold what was happening inside it. I stood between rows of trees pretending to look at fruit I did not care about, trying to breathe like a normal person. Ryan found me a few minutes later. "There you are," he said. "Why did you disappear?" I turned away and said, "I just needed air." He studied me for a second. "You have been weird all day." I laughed once, short and empty. "Maybe I am just tired." He kept looking at me like he was trying to solve a problem that did not make sense yet. Did I do something? That question nearly ruined me, because the truthful answer was yes and no at the exact same time. "No," I said finally. "You did not do anything." And he had not. Not really. He was only being himself. Loving the girl he wanted. Living the life that made sense to him. I was the one standing in an orchard trying not to fall apart over a love that had never once been mine. The break did not happen all at once. That would have been easier to understand. There was no big fight, no final argument. No moment where Ryan looked at me and said he knew exactly what I felt and wanted no part of it. It was worse than that. It happened slowly, through one sentence I sent when I was hurt enough to stop pretending I could still act like a normal friend. The day after we got back, he texted me like nothing had happened. He asked if I wanted to work a temporary job with him to save money for another trip later that year. Under any other circumstances, I would have said yes before he even finished asking. But I was still carrying that orchard inside my chest. I was still replaying every second of that trip, every laugh, every glance, every moment I had stood there feeling like a ghost at the edge of someone else's life. So instead of answering like myself, I answered like the version of me that had finally gotten tired of bleeding quietly. I wrote, "I do not have a reason to go anywhere with you anymore." The second I sent it, I knew I had done something I could not take back. He did not answer right away. The silence after that message felt louder than anything he could have said. When he finally replied, all he sent was, "What is that supposed to mean? Every one of them would have ruined us faster." So I chose the coward's way out. "Nothing," I wrote. "Forget it." He did not forget it. I knew that the next time I saw him, we were both with friends, but the easy rhythm that had always existed between us was gone. He still spoke to me, but more carefully. He still looked at me, but like he was checking for something under my face instead of simply seeing me. The warmth was still there, but it had started pulling back, inch by inch, like someone touching a stove after realizing it might be hot. We did make peace, if that is what you want to call it. There was no big conversation, just an awkward patching over of the obvious. Enough to keep us from becoming strangers in public. Not enough to make us who we had been. After that, he stopped reaching for me the same way. The late-night messages faded. The random invitations disappeared. He still answered when I spoke. He still acted polite. He still gave me enough to prove he was not cruel. But the instinctive part of him, the part that had once found me first, seemed to go quiet. That was when I started doing things I am not proud of. I would ride past the places where I knew he worked part-time just to catch one glimpse of him through a window. Sometimes I would stand across the street longer than I should have, pretending I had some other reason to be there. Once I saw him laughing with a customer, and the sight of how normal he looked nearly destroyed me. I remember thinking, how can you look that normal when I have not felt normal in months? He had done nothing wrong. Used to. He read the message and answered hours later with, I have got stuff going on. It was never rude enough to call rejection, but it was never open enough to call hope either. One night, after staring at my phone for almost an hour, I finally wrote, Are you avoiding me? He replied, No, I am just busy. I looked at that sentence until the words stopped feeling real. Maybe he believed it. Maybe he needed to believe it. Maybe we both did. The truth was obvious by then. He knew something had shifted in me, even if he did not have the full shape of it yet. And whatever he suspected, it was enough to make him careful. Careful became distance. Distance became habit. Habit became the new version of us. The worst part was that I still did not want to lose him. Even then, even after everything. If he had called me in the middle of the night and said, Come out, I need you, I still would have gone. That was how completely he had rearranged me. I was angry, but not at him. I was ashamed, but mostly of myself. I could feel the truth pressing harder against my ribs every day, and I knew it was only a matter of time before silence stopped being something I could survive. Silence stopped being survivable a few months later. And the worst part was that when I finally said the truth out loud, I did not even do it face to face. By then, Ryan and I had turned into something that looked almost normal from the outside and felt unbearable from where I stood. We still crossed paths sometimes. We still ended up online with the same group late at night, playing games, trading jokes, pretending there was not a whole broken version of our friendship sitting quietly between us. I think both of us wanted to save whatever was left. I think both of us were also terrified of touching the one thing that had already damaged it. But pain does not stay still forever. It either fades or starts looking for a way out. Mine found one on a night when we were both online, both quiet, both pretending nothing was wrong. I remember staring at the game chat for a long time with my hands shaking over the keyboard. Must have typed the sentence 10 different ways before I sent the ugliest and simplest version of it. I wrote, I like you. You know that, right? The second it appeared on the screen, I felt sick. Not because it was false, but because it was the first honest thing I had said in too long, and I already knew honesty was not going to save me. Ryan did not answer right away. I watched the screen like someone waiting for impact. When his reply finally came, it was exactly the kind of answer that would have sounded gentle to anyone who had never loved him the way I did. He wrote, Maybe you just have not met enough people yet. I stared at the sentence until it blurred. Even then, part of me wanted to ask more. Part of me wanted to drag the knife the rest of the way through and hear something final enough that I would stop hoping. So I typed, Is that all? There was another pause. Then he sent the line that stayed with me longer than the confession itself. I think we can be friends. That was it. No anger. No disgust. No cruelty. Just a soft line placed carefully between us. Like he was trying not to hurt me while still making sure I understood where I was not allowed to go. I did understand. That was what made it so hard to breathe. I sat there in the dark with the screen lighting up my room and felt a kind of shame I still do not know how to explain properly. Not because I had liked him. Not even because he did not like me back. It was the shame of realizing that I had taken something quiet and broken it open in front of someone who had only ever wanted to keep it simple. I answered, "Yeah, okay." He replied with, "Get some sleep." That should have been the most ordinary message in the world. Instead, it felt like a door closing. After that, the avoidance stopped being subtle. He no longer stayed online if I was there. He stopped answering unless the conversation stayed completely safe. If I messaged first, he replied hours later or not at all. If the group was planning something, I usually heard about it from somebody else. Once, a friend asked in our chat, "Ryan, you coming?" And he answered immediately. But when I sent, "You there?" my message sat unread until the next day. It was small things like that. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone else would have called cruel. But if you have ever been close enough to someone to know the shape of their attention, then you know how loud absence can be. I did not blame him. Even then, I did not. He was a straight guy who had just been told his male best friend was in love with him. Of course he pulled away. Of course he got careful. Of course he chose distance over confusion. He was not the villain in my story. He was just the person I loved in the wrong way. But knowing that did not make it hurt less. If anything, it made it worse, because I could not even turn my heartbreak into anger. There was nowhere for it to go. So I carried it alone and told myself the same thing every night. You wanted the truth and now you have it. The problem was that truth did not set me free. It only made the loneliness official. Time kept moving, even when I did not want it to. For a long time, I thought that meant I would eventually become somebody untouched by what happened. Somebody who could hear Ryan's name without feeling that old tightness under my ribs. That never really happened. What happened instead was quieter. I learned how to carry it better. I stopped checking whether he was online. I stopped inventing reasons to pass by places where he might be. I stopped looking for him in every room without thinking. The feeling did not disappear. It just sank deeper, somewhere below the surface, where it could sit without ruining every hour of my day. More than a year passed before we spoke again in any real way. He was the one who started it. Nothing dramatic, just a casual message. The kind an old friend sends when enough time has gone by that both people can pretend the worst part belongs to another version of themselves. "Hey," he wrote, "how have you been?" I looked at that one word for a long time before I answered. "Fine," I wrote back. "You?" he said. "Same old me." That was probably the first lie between us that both of us agreed not to question. We did see each other again after that. Sometimes with friends. Sometimes in group plans that felt easy enough as long as nobody looked too closely. We even got coffee once. Just the two of us. And for a few brief minutes I almost believed we had found our way back to something familiar. He talked the same way he always had. Light and fast and full of whatever had happened that week. He asked about my job, my family, whether I was sleeping enough. At one point he smiled and said, "You still overthink everything?" I laughed softly and answered, "Only the important things." He grinned. So yes, from the outside it probably looked normal. Two old friends catching up. But there was a wall between us by then, and I was the one who had built it. I could not let him back into the place he used to live in me, because I knew what would happen if I did. The smallest thing could start the fire again. A look, a late message, a memory. He seemed able to move around what happened like it had become part of the past. I could not. I do not think he was heartless. I think he genuinely wanted to keep whatever friendship he still could. But he was standing on solid ground, and I was still measuring every step. Years kept passing. He joined the military for a while. Later I did too. Life filled up with other things, work, schedules, travel, exhaustion, all the practical details that make adulthood feel less like a dream and more like maintenance. We talked on and off through some of those years. Sometimes more often, sometimes not at all. After one breakup of his, people around me expected me to care more than I let myself show. I acted like it meant nothing. By then I had learned that hope was more dangerous to me than grief. So I stopped feeding it. We drifted, reconnected, drifted again. That became our pattern. Even after I left the military and started working an office job at a watch company, even after he began preparing to move overseas for work, there were still small windows where we looked almost like ourselves again. Coffee on a day off, a meal somewhere ordinary, an afternoon at the gym. But I was not the same person I had been at 17, and neither was he. I laughed less. I held more back. I treated every good moment like something temporary I was not allowed to trust. Then one day, not long before he left to work abroad, I saw a photo of him out getting coffee with somebody else. It should not have mattered. Friends have other friends. Adults live their own lives. But something old and stupid and painful rose in me so fast that I recognized it immediately. The feeling had never died. It had only been waiting. When he messaged me after that to ask how I was doing, I read it and did not answer. That was the choice I made in the end. Not because I hated him. Not because I blamed him. Because I finally understood that some people can stay in your life only if you are willing to keep reopening the same wound. I was not. More than 5 years have passed now. Tonight I looked at his wedding photo and felt everything come back for one quiet, brutal second. And then something surprising happened. I put my phone down, sat in the dark, and realized that loving him was one of the saddest things that ever happened to me. But it was also one of the truest. He did not ruin my life. He did not save it either. He was just the person I loved when I was too young to understand that some feelings never become relationships. Sometimes they just become memories you learn to live beside. I still do not hate him. I still do not think he did anything wrong. If anything, the hardest part was that he was kind enough to matter and ordinary enough to be impossible. And maybe that is why, even now, after all these years, some part of me still remembers exactly what it felt like to hear him say, "Get on," and believe for one reckless second that I might actually be going somewhere with him.